Imagine being the woman who decided what a supermodel should look like. Tall, thin, blonde. The Ford look. For decades, Eileen Ford's word was law. If she liked you, your face could be on every magazine stand in the world. If she didn't, your career was over before it even began. She told girls under 5 feet 7 inches, "Give up your dreams." She cut models with brutal honesty, yet protected her chosen ones like a mother hen, giving them contracts, homes, and rules stricter than the industry itself. But how did she rise from a small-time agent in post-war New York to the most powerful woman in fashion? Her agency launched legends like Brooke Shields, Naomi Campbell, Jerry Hall. It sparked bitter rivalries with John Casablancas and Wilhelmina, battles that defined the supermodel era. Eileen Ford didn't just run an agency. She built the blueprint for the supermodel itself and blacklisted anyone who stood in her way. So did Eileen build the supermodel era or rule it with fear? Before she became the most feared woman in modeling, Eileen Ford was just Eileen Ott, a psychology student at Barnard College in New York. She modeled a little herself, but quickly realized she didn't have the face. Later, she laughed at those early test shots, calling her round face and curly hair plain. What she did have, though, was an uncanny eye for what other faces could do in front of a camera. After graduating, she drifted into the fashion world as a stylist and assistant, helping friends book jobs here and there. The mid-1940s were a strange time for modeling in America. The industry was disorganized, full of shady contracts, late payments, and girls treated as disposable. Photographers often grabbed whoever was standing around. Modeling wasn't yet a career. It was a hobby, or worse, a reputation risk. That changed in 1946, when Eileen and her husband Jerry Ford decided to open their own agency out of her parents' house. They sold their car to cover the rent on a tiny Manhattan office. Not exactly glamorous beginnings, but from day one, they wanted to do things differently. Jerry, the business mind, introduced contracts, regular wages, and payment systems that made modeling a legitimate job instead of a gamble. Eileen, meanwhile, took charge of finding the talent and of shaping them. She signed Jean Patchett with her signature beauty mark. And Susie Parker, the fiery redhead who became one of the faces of the 1950s. She worked with Dorian Lee, one of the first real supermodels. These weren't just pretty women. Under Eileen's system, they became marketable stars. Her standards were strict. Models had to be tall, polished, disciplined, and photogenic by her very specific criteria. She monitored their weight, their manners, even their curfews. She called them my girls. But it was clear that being one of Eileen's girls meant giving up a lot of freedom. Still, she also offered something no other agent did: protection. Parents trusted her, clients trusted her, and the girls, many barely out of high school, trusted her to keep them safe in an industry notorious for sleaze. By the early 1950s, Ford Models was setting a new precedent. What began as a side hustle for a young couple was already reshaping the entire industry. And Eileen was learning the lesson that would define her career. In fashion, control wasn't just an advantage. Control was power, and she was only just beginning to wield it. Through the 1950s and into the 60s, that power became undeniable. Ford Models wasn't just another agency in New York. It was the agency. And that was because of Eileen's rules. She didn't just scout girls. She decided what a model should be. The Ford look became a global standard. As Eileen explained in a 1980s interview,
high cheekbones and wide-set eyes and big eyes and long necks are always essential. The thing is, it's a question of how you present the long neck and the wide eyes to the camera.
The formula that launched 1,000 careers. If you had it, your life could change overnight. If you didn't, she wouldn't hesitate to shut the door. Girls under 5 feet 7 inches? She told them flat out, give up your dreams. A curvy bust line? Forget it. It was brutal honesty, but Eileen insisted she was doing these girls a favor, saving them from wasting time. For the ones she did choose, Ford offered something the rest of the industry couldn't: stability. Jerry Ford introduced contracts that guaranteed models would still be paid even if a client canceled. At home, Eileen enforced rules like a headmistress. She housed young models in her townhouse, made them sit down at her dinner table every night, and even checked their homework. Kim Basinger recalled being told she couldn't go out before finishing her French assignments. Other girls remembered slammed doors and tears when Eileen laughed off their cookie-only diets. To some, it felt suffocating, but compared to the chaos and sleaze of other agencies, Ford Models seemed like a safe haven. It was this strange mix of cruelty and protection that set Ford apart. She didn't just manage girls, she molded them into professionals. She taught them how to walk into a room, how to dress, how to hold themselves like stars. And it worked. Jane Fonda, Jerry Hall, Kim Basinger, Christy Turlington, all credited Ford with giving them a platform to move beyond modeling into lasting careers. By turning modeling into a structured career, she built the very idea of the supermodel. Someone who wasn't just a pretty face, but a celebrity who could command millions. But the higher Ford climbed, the more enemies she made. Other agencies wanted her stars, and rivals had very different ideas of what a model should be. The supermodel era was only just beginning. And Eileen was about to face her first real war to keep the crown. That first real war came quickly. Eileen Ford wasn't just strict with her own models. She was merciless with anyone who crossed her. She built a reputation for blacklisting girls who defected and punishing those she felt betrayed her. The most famous story? When Monique Pillard, one of her top executives, left to join Elite, Eileen mailed her a Bible with every passage about Judas underlined in red. It wasn't just business. For Eileen, loyalty was survival. But her blacklist wasn't only about business betrayals. In 1988, 60 Minutes investigation into misconduct in the modeling industry, Eileen was confronted with evidence about Claude Haddad, a Paris agency owner accused by multiple models of inappropriate behavior. When asked if she would send her girls to him, her answer was immediate.
No, ma'am. He knows why. Why? Because I don't think he behaved properly with some of them. I know he didn't.
She had letters from girls detailing what he'd done, and she cut him off. For Eileen, protection meant drawing hard lines, but primarily for those under her own roof. Inside Ford's offices, she even kept weekly lists of models to be cut. To her, apparent cruelty was kinder than letting false hope linger. "I must see 20 tons of excess weight a year," she once said. "If she thought you didn't have it, you were gone." To the girls, it was brutal. To Eileen, it was discipline, and discipline was the only way to keep the agency on top. The 1970s brought her fiercest rivalries. Wilhelmina Cooper, once one of Ford's own stars, broke away to launch Wilhelmina Models in 1967. That defection cut deep. But the real clash came a decade later, when John Casablancas founded Elite Models. If Eileen ran her agency like a convent, curfews, homework, diets, Casablancas was the opposite. Champagne parties, seduction, freedom. He made himself a playboy figure, sleeping with the models he signed, and selling an image of glamour that was the direct opposite of Ford's strict control. To young girls, it looked intoxicating compared to rules and curfews. What followed was open warfare. Elite poached Ford's biggest stars. Eileen struck back with lawsuits and blacklists. Tabloids called it the Model Wars, and it turned the agency business into front-page scandal. Photographers, editors, and even designers were forced to take sides. Suddenly, the business of booking covers and campaigns became a fight for who would own the industry itself. For Eileen, the chaos was proof of what she had built. No one would risk so much to steal models unless Ford Models was the crown jewel. But the wars also hardened her image. To her defenders, she was protecting her girls, shielding them from sleaze, and professionalizing a dirty business. To her critics, she was a tyrant who controlled bodies and futures with an iron hand. And as the 1980s approached, the stakes only grew. Because what started as an agency feud was about to decide something much bigger. Who really controlled the age of the supermodel? What really kept Ford models at the top wasn't just contracts or lawsuits. It was the faces Eileen pushed into the spotlight and the way she managed them. Each one became a case study in how far she would go to control a career. Take Brooke Shields. Eileen signed her at just 11 years old. By 15, Brooke was fronting Calvin Klein's infamous ads, staring into the camera and saying, "Nothing comes between me and my Calvins." The backlash was immediate. Politicians and parents condemned the campaign as too sexual for a teenager. But Eileen didn't waver. She stood by Brooke, defended the work, and kept booking her. It showed that in Eileen's world, controversy wasn't something to avoid. If anything, it could be leveraged. Jerry Hall's story shows the same mix of toughness and vision. In Texas, she'd been told she was too exotic for fashion. Eileen disagreed. She signed Jerry, gave her the rules of the Ford household, and pushed her toward Europe. Paris and Milan embraced her, and by the late 70s, Jerry was walking for Yves Saint Laurent and appearing on magazine covers worldwide. Eileen hadn't just seen potential. She had forced the industry to see it too. And then there was Naomi Campbell. Eileen signed her at just 15, and by the late 80s, Naomi had become one of the first black supermodels to achieve global fame. But even that relationship showed Eileen's contradictions. While she helped launch Naomi's career, the industry Eileen helped shape was still painfully slow to embrace diversity. Naomi herself has often spoken about the racism she faced on runways and in magazines, proof that even Ford's reach couldn't erase the industry's biases. And the list kept going. Jane Fonda, Kim Basinger, Candice Bergen, Lauren Hutton, all women who passed through Ford's books, each shaped in some way by Eileen's discipline. To some, she was the reason they had careers at all. To others, she was suffocating, a woman who enforced rules and cut off anyone who didn't comply. That was the deal of being a Ford girl. But by the late 1980s, that deal didn't hold the same power it once had. The industry itself was changing, and for the first time in decades, Eileen Ford's rules didn't seem to fit the moment. Her ideal was the tall, blonde, polished Ford look. But the 90s supermodel wave brought something different. Women like Kate Moss and the waif generation represented a looser, grungier aesthetic that Eileen openly dismissed. She once said Moss looked more like a child than a model, and for someone who had spent her life setting the standard, it was a sign that the standard was slipping away. Meanwhile, her fiercest rival, John Casablancas and Elite Models, was thriving. Where Eileen demanded obedience and curfews, Casablancas offered glamour and freedom. Elite poached Ford's stars, ran ads promising looser contracts, and cultivated an image of fun over discipline. For a generation of models coming of age in the MTV era, Elite looked like the future. Inside Ford models, the old rules sometimes turned cruel. Stories circulated about Eileen laughing when a girl admitted she was starving herself, brushing it off with the line, "That's modeling." Others recalled her ruthless honesty. She once quipped that, "A bosom is terribly detrimental to a career, as if curves alone could disqualify someone from the industry." What had once made her a protector now made her seem out of touch, even damaging. By the 2000s, the empire she and Jerry had built was no longer the force it once was. In 2007, the Ford sold the agency to private investors. A year later, Jerry passed away, ending the partnership that had defined her career. And in 2014, Eileen herself passed away at the age of 92. Her legacy is a contradiction. She professionalized an industry that had been chaotic and exploitative. She gave models contracts, legal protections, and in some cases, something close to family. But she also enforced brutal beauty standards that shaped generations of women. Standards that many now look back on as harmful. For every Brooke Shields she defended, there was a girl she dismissed with a single line, cutting short a dream before it began. In 2025, the modeling industry looks nothing like the one Eileen Ford built. Social media, influencers, and looser beauty ideals have broken her blueprint. Yet her shadow is still there, in the contracts models sign, in the agencies that still promise protection while enforcing impossible standards, and in the very idea of the supermodel, a concept she turned into a global brand. So how do we remember her? Was Eileen Ford the woman who saved modeling from chaos, or the ruthless boss who enforced an impossible standard?